What's up, everybody? This is Kincade, and I'm super excited to bring you episode 4 of the 2003 Suzuki RM125 build. It's the middle of February, and we're having a crazy warm and dry Montana winter, which is a bummer for the snowboarding, but I was actually able to take the 250 out yesterday and go for a little ride. There's still quite a bit of snow, but I did get some good dirt, so that was fun. Anyway, I'm stoked to start episode 4 because I finally have everything I need to get this engine started. Millennium Technologies was super quick with this crank rebuild, and they did an awesome job. Check that out. No more play. We've got this brand new Pro X connecting rod on there. So this crankshaft should be good to go for many more hours to come on this engine. Millennium sent back the old rod and parts, I imagine, just so I could see how screwed up they were. Check this out. These are pieces of the bearing that used to be in there. So good thing we got this thing all set. Now moving along, we have a crankshaft bearing and seal kit from Pro X. Got both of our crank bearings and our new seals. Thanks again to Pro X for helping out on this build. They sell super high quality components, and I'm really excited to be using their parts on this build. Lastly, I have some new transmission bearings. And not to forget the freshly vapor blasted cases from Greg Hitchko, ready to go. So this is actually the first time I've ever had anything vapor blasted, and Greg left me a note saying that he already cleaned them out pretty well, but to give these just one more wash to make sure that there's none of the abrasive left over in the cases or in any of the bolt holes. While I do that, I will preheat the oven to put the cases back in to get those to expand a little bit, and I'm going to throw all of our bearings in the freshly Costco stocked freezer. Also, I could use a quick opinion from you guys on these engine covers. For the clutch cover, I've been leaning towards just using Pryme MX cleaning wheels and polishing this up to a really nice shine. For the ignition cover, I've been leaning towards painting it black with yellow letters, masking off the letters, painting these yellow, and then painting the rest of it black. I think it would look really good, but obviously these look great just vapor blasted too. So if anybody has strong feelings about that, I could go black on this too and have those black accents on either side of the engine. So while the engine cases are in the oven, I've just been doing a little inspection of the transmission. Everything looks really nice. All the teeth are good. Nothing looks too worn, although there are some metal shavings and other small pieces kind of strewn about the transmission. Everything spins nice and freely, so there's nothing I'm concerned about in the usability of any of these parts. But I do need to make sure that I get all of the little metal shavings out so that it doesn't cause an issue once the bike is running again. The cases are hot and ready to go. Our bearings are nice and frozen. Hopefully these will drop right in. For the crank bearings, if you recall, there was a little bit of scoring here in the case that I had to smooth out. So to avoid the risk of the bearing having any play or ever becoming loose, we're gonna be using a little bit of this high temperature sleeve retainer. I've actually never used this stuff before, but it comes out just like Loctite, and I'm just gonna put it around the bearing. Put just a little bit inside the case as well. And let's see if this bearing wants to just drop in. And there we go, that one was nice and easy. Okay, this one's gonna need just a little bit of love. And now we're on to the transmission. Looks like this guy is gonna go right there, nice and easy. Oh, that one almost pressed all the way in and just got caught up. I don't know if you can hear the difference in sound there, but it's pretty clear when a bearing is seated. Also, if you notice, I'm pretty gentle and I use just the outside race of the bearing. That way you can't damage the way it spins. There we go, that one is seated. So with this type of bearing, you want to be a little bit more careful if you're using this method because the outer race is essentially the inner race. So you just want to make sure you're not beating on it too hard to where this still spins freely. I have in the past accidentally bent this race and ruined that bearing. So you got to be careful with that, but this one installed no problem, nice and smooth. And that one just slipped right in, no problem. There we go, bearings installed, nice and easy. Doing seals while the cases are hot is also much easier. This one pressed in 90% by hand, so all I did was give it a couple tiny taps to get it all the way in and seated. This one I pushed in entirely by hand. Next up, we need to install the bearing retainers. I am going to use a little bit of blue Loctite here on these. And I'm gonna go ahead and use my impact screwdriver as kind of the torque on this, just one little hit. If you decide to use this method and use an impact screwdriver, do not hit it too hard. These do not need to be over torqued. That's what the Loctite's for. All we're doing is making sure that these bearings are not able to come out. And just like that, all of our bearings and retainers are installed. Transmission is spinning nice and freely. We've got the shift forks installed. What that means is we're actually ready to do a dry fit of this case. Now, I've learned from previous bikes, it's not worth putting the sealant on right away because sometimes you have little issues and a bearing's not all the way seated, or there's an issue with the transmission, and then all of a sudden you got to scrape a bunch of gasket sealer to do the same thing over again. So although it's a pain to do a dry fit, if everything works, it still is a little bit less hassle. So the bottom end of the engine is on hold for just a couple days while I wait for some bolts. In the meantime, I think it's time to get these linkage bearings installed. I have this brand new set of linkage bearings from Pro X. Super high quality bearings that include everything I need to get this done. To install the bearings, I will just be using my vise and sockets. The linkage bearing install was completely painless. Super easy with the linkage all cleaned up nicely. All the bearings went in without any trouble at all. Got them all greased up and ready to go. We're gonna have a bike with some smooth pivot points. This Pro X rebuild kit was awesome and had everything I needed to get the job done. Good morning, everybody. Just woke up and couldn't stop thinking about some news I got from Excel yesterday and what I am going to do about it. So the gold rims that I was going to get for this bike have been on back order. I was hoping to get them on time to have this bike ready for Cameron's Broke to Built contest, but it looks like the rear rim is on back order until July, which just isn't gonna work, and I'm pretty committed to having gold rims on this bike. Could go black, but my whole vision for this bike has been gold rims, and especially with the rest of the color scheme I went for, I really wanna go with gold. So what I've decided to do is use the stock rims. I need to go ahead and remove these tires, which is of course even a little trickier now that I've cut the hubs out of the rims, so I am just gonna saw the tires right off with a hacksaw. I'm not gonna reuse them, so this method's pretty effective. These rims do have some scratches and wear on them, and my goal is going to be to make them look pretty much perfect again. As always, to get that done, I will be using Pryme MX cleaning wheels. This rear is pretty darn scratched up, so we're gonna have our work cut out for us with the Pryme MX wheels. Also, I'm not sure what somebody hit on this area, but these ones are gonna be a little tricky to get to, but should be able to get it done. The rims are all cleaned up. I'm very happy with how these things turned out. Check out the rear rim here. With the Pryme MX rough cleaning wheel on the Dremel, I got pretty much all of those major scratches out. The rim is looking real nice and clean. The front looks practically perfect. It had a lot less overall damage than the rear. As much as I was looking forward to running some brand new Excel rims on this bike, it is really satisfying to reuse the original rims and get these all cleaned up to send out for anodizing. Now switching gears back to the engine, we have the case together ready for a dry fit, and I have this set of crankcase bolts from Fast Metric. So this is a full set of replacement bolts, all shiny, fresh, and ready to go to have this engine looking brand new. Okay, so when the cases are bolted together, I cannot get the crankshaft to spin freely. Well, to be honest, I am defeated for the evening. Sometimes this happens when building bikes. It's frustrating and you gotta find a way to solve the problems, but that's just part of it. I loosened all the bolts, and this is how much the crankcase separates itself to relieve that tension. Now, the crankshaft spins, but clearly we've got an issue. Not quite sure how to solve this yet or what the next step is. Well, the next step is of course splitting the cases, but from there, not entirely sure. Probably gonna need to measure the spec of the crankshaft and go from there. I decided I might as well not call it quits on the night just yet. There's a few more things I can make progress on, namely getting these wheel bearings installed into the hubs. I've got brand new sets of rear and front Pro X wheel bearings that I'll be installing into these hubs. They are fresh out of the freezer, so hopefully they will go in nice and easy. Got this bearing in. Now when you flip it over, one thing I tend to forget is to install the sleeve. Again, can't forget the spacer. Alright, and now our hubs are ready to go with wheel bearings thanks to Pro X. I did unfortunately chip a little bit of paint off of the hubs while installing these bearings. Truthfully, this isn't really an issue I've had before, but I realized that I should have been a little more careful and put down something soft under the hub while installing the bearings. Once I realized my mistake, I did do that for this side and no paint chipped whatsoever. I will try and touch up these little points of the hub, but for now, I'm gonna call that a night. Okay, today is the day that I try to figure out what is going on with this bottom end and why the crank won't spin. But I want to show you guys real quick what I picked up the other day. Woo-wee! What do you think of that? Powdercoating of Montana did an awesome, awesome job. I was a little worried that I didn't pick the right yellow, but I think this looks amazing. And then let's take a look at the other components. Swing arm, triple clamp, subframe. I am incredibly happy with how the clamps look after grinding the casting marks off. They look so factory. Removing the casting lines and then having them coated just adds an entirely new level of beauty. I did intend for these pieces to be a little bit closer to a dark gray, but I'm not bummed at all. I think the color that they came out as looks really good and it's gonna look phenomenal on the bike. If you need any powder coating work done and you're in the Bozeman area or don't have anywhere local and need to ship your stuff off, I would highly recommend getting in touch with Powdercoating of Montana. They did an awesome job on these parts. So I'm feeling like a little bit of an idiot, but I'm optimistic that I found the solution to the problem. I called my dad the other day because he's been working on bikes his whole life and explained to him the problem with the crank seizing, and we talked over a few options, but then he suggested, you know what, you better make sure that there's no center case gasket, because on every two-stroke I've ever built so far, you've just used gasket sealer for the crankcases and there's never been a gasket. And I said, you know, that's a good idea. I don't think there is one, but I'll check the diagram. And I was on my way home from work. I quickly proceeded to forget entirely about that conversation and was focusing on the other possible reasons for failure. Turns out there is a center case gasket. So now I'm gonna get the other case half installed and bolt these together and see if that was it. Maybe this amount of thickness right here was my only issue. Well, I definitely burned a lot of time with this mistake, but the good news is I figured it out. The engine is in the stand. It's always super satisfying once the bottom end is bolted together and I've got it in the stand. I have a crank that spins and I have a transmission that spins. This thing is ready to continue assembly. I'm going to get these IMS Pro Series pegs installed on the freshly powder coated frame. Got the peg bolts all polished up, and we've got some fresh washers and cotter pins from Fast Metric. Well, on that positive note, I'm going to call it a wrap for episode 4. Got quite a bit accomplished in this episode, and I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at. I think it's looking like I'll be on track to have this bike done in time to submit it to Cameron Niemela's Broke to Built contest. Got the bottom end in a stand, pegs on the freshly powder coated frame. Things are looking good. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon with episode 5.